Welcome to the virtual guided learning library from InsideOut Literary Arts. InsideOut immerses students in the joy and power of poetry through classroom residencies, after-school workshops, performances, publications, and community programming led by our team of professional writers and artists. We are so happy to have you join us today and look forward to the words, ideas, and stories you will share. Hello, my name is poet Shawntai Brown, and I am a writer in residence with InsideOut Literary Arts. Today, we will learn how to understand figurative language to interpret a speaker's point of view. Then, we can use figurative language to help others see our point of view. First, let's play with some figurative language. First, we're going to identify examples of figurative language. Then we will read a poem by Jamila Woods called Zora. Then we will write and practice using figurative language. And finally, we will reflect and share and make meaning. First, let's start with identifying examples of figurative language. When we hear the sky is falling, what do we really mean? The sky has never fallen. Some things in the sky may fall, such as gaseous remains of stars or precipitation or even comets, but the sky has never fallen, not all at once and not to our knowledge. So what does the sky is falling really mean? Well, let's imagine it. If we think about the image of the sky literally coming down, we may get a feeling of chaos, impending doom, or disarray. That's what figurative language is meant to do. It sometimes is meant to create a certain feeling or tone or to get a point across. Figurative language is used to make our writing more interesting and colorful, and it can also be used to persuade or impact the reader. There are lots of different forms of figurative language, like the wordplay we explored in the previous video. In this video, we will focus on metaphors and symbolism, although there are plenty more examples of figurative language in this poem. First, let's start off with some of the things we will explore. Metaphor is a figure of speech that describes an object in a way that isn't literally true, but helps explain an idea or make a comparison, such as it's raining cats and dogs. Fortunately, this has never happened, but sometimes we may feel as though we're dealing with this kind of chaos. Symbolism is a symbolic meaning attributed to natural objects or facts. So we can think of symbols such as knowledge. You might see a book or a light bulb or gear used to explain knowledge, a fist to show power, or colors of the rainbow to show acceptance. And then finally, we've talked about wordplay, where you may change the meaning of the word or even how it's used. Is it a verb or a noun right now, in order to play with how the audience interprets what you say. Song lyrics are a form of poetry. They are lines set to music. Today we will explore the song lyrics to Zora by Jamila Woods. In the full song, the author uses an expression outside of school vocabulary. So we ask that you gain teacher or parental permission if you choose to listen. However, for today's activity, we will be focusing only on this excerpt or a small portion of the song. Must be disconcerting how I discombobed the mold. I've always been the only, every classroom, every home. Kiss of chocolate on the moon, collard greens and silver spoon. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes you can't stick unto me. My weaponry is my energy. I tenderly fill my enemies with white light. You will never know everything, everything. I will never know everything, everything. You will never know everything, everything. And you don't know me, so you up the creek. You will never know everything, everything. I will never know everything, everything. You will never know everything, everything. And you don't know me. Couldn't possibly. Here are a few definitions we'll need to work with. Let's see if we can find examples of figurative language in this lesson. First, a metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech that describes an object or an action in a way that isn't literally true, but helps make an idea or a comparison. Symbolism. Symbolism is the symbolic meaning attributed to natural objects or facts, such as a book representing knowledge, a raised fist representing power, or a rainbow representing acceptance of LGBTQ people. The song gives us clues as to what the speaker is talking about. What do you think the main idea of the song or poem is? When you can determine the main idea from the literal language, interpreting the figurative language is much easier. From reading the poem, you may find the speaker feels they are different in some sort of way, misunderstood, maybe even feel threatened or the need to be defensive. The bolded lines support this thinking. Let's take a look. Must be disconcerting how I discombobed the mold. There's something about chaos and going against the typical way of doing something. I've always been the only, every classroom, every home, gives me the feeling that the speaker feels very alone. They talk about weaponry and enemies, meaning that they feel like they have people against them. And then they repeat, you will never know everything, everything. I will never know everything, everything, and you don't know me. All of these give us pretty good clues into what the main idea is, because most of these examples are literal language. Now let's see if we can better understand some of the figurative language with the main idea in mind to help us create context. Let's focus on the third line in the first stanza and take a look at metaphor and symbolism. Must be disconcerting how I discombobed the mold. I've always been the only, every classroom, every home. Kiss of chocolate on the moon, collard greens and silver spoon, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes you can't stick 'em to me. So what does the writer mean by kiss of chocolate on the moon? Think about the colors in this image of the chocolate and of the moon. Maybe also think about the size. How would the kiss of chocolate compare to the size of the moon? Probably pretty small. If the speaker felt like this kiss of chocolate on the moon, maybe they feel lonely, small, insignificant, or unnoticeable. How does it relate to the previous line of the poem? I've always been the only, every classroom, every home. What do you think the speaker means when they say this line? For this, we can consider other information, like the speaker. The author of this poem is a Black woman, and perhaps this is related to the line. The identity of the speaker can tell us a little bit more about how we might interpret the figurative language. If we think about race, does this relate to the image of the chocolate on the moon? What might the author be trying to get us to understand more deeply? Now, let's look at symbolism. Collard greens and silver spoon. What associations do you know about collard greens? You may need to do a little research if you're unfamiliar with collards. Who eats them? When are they eaten? How are they eaten? Who are they eaten with? Collard greens are a rich nutrient vegetable able to be eaten by any culture, but most notably popularized in the South by Black descendants of West Africa. The food was also consumed by those who were of lower socioeconomic status because they were easy to grow and undervalued by many rich and often white families. The greens are affordable and quite tasty, especially when mixed with food that might otherwise be thrown out. It remains a popular soul food dish and is consumed any time of year, but most definitely on Thanksgiving in many Black households. It's also a staple in some Asian traditions. Now, what comes to mind when you think of silver spoon? What is the value of silver, and who has access to it? Take a moment to pause and talk about this with a peer. A silver spoon is a popular idiom or a popular figure of speech in the US, and it refers to being born with wealth. Who in the US is born with wealth? What does wealth allow a person to do? By comparing the symbol of collard greens, which represents Black traditions and family, and sometimes making do with what little you have, to a silver spoon, which can represent wealth and access, we can start to see the economic and racial undertones of the song without Jamila Woods even having to explicitly bring them up. Perhaps these give us a clue into the main idea of why the speaker feels so alone, different, and sometimes defensive in spaces. It may even inform the last line, an allusion, because it refers to a song called Little Boxes by Malvina Reynolds about planned communities and access to wealth. Feel free to pause this video and look up Malvina Reynolds if you would like to know more about that allusion. What other figurative language can you find in this song? What questions does the language bring up for you? What might you need to learn more about to fully understand the song? For instance, you may want to look up Zora Neale Hurston, whom the song is named after, to get more insight into what the writer was trying to convey. Take a moment to pause this video and see what else you can discover in this poem or song. What questions does it bring up for you? And what might you need to know more about? Now, let's do some writing practice. We are going to practice using figurative language. The biggest key to figurative language is understanding comparison. To understand wordplay, you must understand the original definition of a word compared to how it's being used in the text. The same with metaphor and symbolism. What is being compared? How does the comparison convey a message? You will exercise the skill in the writing prompt. Here are a few different options, and remember, you can always just choose to write about whatever you're feeling at this moment. But if you're up for a challenge and you need a few suggestions, here are a few. Write about a time when you felt different or out of place. Or write about a time when you chose to stand out. Or write about a time you felt accepted. Of course, remember to use the things we've learned today. For your challenge, incorporate symbolism, metaphor, or wordplay to deepen the reader's understanding of your experience. Something you may want to keep in mind is what was different about you and what is the same. You might be able to use that to create your first metaphor, symbol, or wordplay. Now that we've identified some examples of figurative language, read the song and poem Zora by Jamila Woods, practiced using figurative language, it's time to share, reflect, and make meaning. In what ways does figurative language make it harder or easier to write about things personal to you? I know for me, sometimes figurative language makes it easier to be vulnerable because I can hide some of those things that are scary to say behind metaphors. On the other hand, sometimes if I'm not careful with how I use figurative language, it can cause people to misunderstand what I'm really trying to say. Either way, it's a pretty amazing tool for writing that we can incorporate not only into our poems, but into essays and all sorts of other things we may choose to write. Can you use symbolism, a metaphor, or wordplay to deepen the reader's understanding of your experience? And don't be afraid to share your writing with a friend, classmate, or parent. Thanks for watching this video. Through a curriculum rich in literary arts, social-emotional learning, and self-expression, InsideOut inspires students to think broadly, create bravely, and share their voices with the wider world. For more information, visit InsideOut Literary Arts on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or at InsideOutDetroit.org.